छुट्टी हो गई भाई तुम लोगों की. Okay, so you all are aware about the sound. That's a ringing sound. Why there is a ringing sound happening? Is this a metal or a non-metal? So you all are aware about basic physical properties of metals and non-metals. And metals are sonorous, whereas non-metals are not. There are other properties also which is there in metals, but they are not available in non-metals. So, hello people, I'm Rachita Sachdeva and I take your chemistry session on a very prestigious platform of Physics Wala. I hope you all are good, doing amazing and preparing well for your exams. So guys, in today's session, we will be doing one short revision of metals and non-metals. But I, as always say in my session, sitting here for hours is not enough until and unless you practice questions. So in the link down below, you will find DPP, that is daily practice papers, as well as notes of the entire session, which you can download and practice questions as many as you can. So without any delay, let's get ourselves started. Chakre for 10, let's have some high energy. So we are starting up with metals and non-metals, and we'll be doing each and everything in detail from scratch. So, as you all are aware about physical properties of metals and non-metals, that is malleability, ductility, sonority, melting point, boiling point, and so on. So, metals are the elements who have the ability to lose electrons, and they are called as electropositive elements. So, most of you always ask me this question, ma'am, what is the meaning of electropositive or electronegative? So, as we talk about metals, metals like sodium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium, then we have gold, silver, copper, etc., etc. All of these are metals, and metals have the ability to lose their valence electrons to attain stability. So sodium loses 1 electron from its valence shell, gets Na plus 1. Calcium loses 2 electron to attain stability, gets Ca2 plus. Magnesium gets 2 plus. Aluminium gets 3 plus, and so on. So once they lose electrons, they get positive charge on them, and we call them as cations. So they are not atoms anymore, they are ions, and in ions they are specifically cations which are positively charged, and those elements which have the ability to lose electrons are called electropositive elements. On the other hand, if we talk about non-metals, non-metal like chlorine, fluorine, bromine, iodine, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, etc., they are non-metals because they have the ability to gain electrons to attain the stable noble gas configuration. So like if we talk about chlorine, chlorine has the ability to gain 1 valence electron and complete its octet configuration. Similarly, fluorine becomes fluoride, bromine becomes fluoride, bromide, iodine becomes iodide. Nitrogen can gain 3 electrons and form N3 minus. We call them as nitride ion. Then we can make oxide, as 2 electrons would be gained in the valence shell to complete the octet. So now they are not atoms anymore, they are now called as anions, and to be very specific, they are anions. So negatively charged ions are called as anions, and those elements which have the ability to gain electrons are electronegative in nature. So they are electronegative. Simply we can say non-metals are electronegative and metals are electropositive. Alright guys, now let's move on further to some of the questions which you usually get in your paper, not only just in your board paper, but there is a high chances of this being asked in your competitive exams also. So, which element is the most abundant metal in the earth crust? So, that is aluminium. So, these are very small details that you have to remember, and just that's a memory based questions that you can solve and gain marks quickly. Right? So that is the information which gives you score. Iron is the second most abundant metal, and if we see that the major metals that found in earth crust are aluminium, calcium, sodium, potassium, then we have magnesium, iron, and so on. But you have to remember which element is most abundant and the second most abundant element in earth crust. Alright guys, now it's time for us to talk about physical properties of metals and non-metals that you are learning since your grade 8. Now, what is important in your grade 10? that is something which is important for us to know. Questions are usually asked from the exceptional part. No one will be asking you about how to write the definition of ductile or what is malleability or what is sonority. No, they will not ask you about the definition. They are keen about you being knowing about each and every exceptions of metals and non-metals. So let's focus upon that for once. So as we talk about malleability, malleability means what? A metal that could be beaten down into sheets. Like for example, if I talk about Kaju Katli or Kaju Roll, you all have seen that they are covered with a silver foil. We call it as varak in Hindi, silver varak. So that silver foil gives it the very attracted or a very mouth-watering feeling to us, right? I'm sure that most of you are already mouth-watering and imagining those sweets right now. So we created a very thin sheet out of it. That thin sheet is possible because it's a metal and it has a property called as malleability. Or if we talk about gold, gold is the most malleable metal. This is something that you all have to remember. Gold is the most malleable metal. Now, if we talk about ductility, also gold wins here as well. Ductility means a metal which can be stretched into wire. So, gold is the most ductile metal because we can make a thinnest, I would say, a wire of gold. In fact, 1 gram of gold can be converted into 2 kilometers of long wire, guys. Just imagine. So ductility is there in metals, but it is not there in non-metals. If we talk about brittle nature, metals are something which are quite rigid and they are not brittle, but non-metals can be broken very easily. I'll give you one simple example like sulfur. Sulfur, you get a small chips of sulfur, which is yellow in color, and we can easily break it by hand. In fact, if we talk about graphite, pencil lead, you can easily break it. A chota sa bachcha can also break that. So yes, they are brittle in nature. And if we talk about conductivity, metals are definitely very good conductor of electricity, whereas non-metals are not. But there is an exception here in case of non-metals, graphite being a substance which is made up of carbon, and it's purely made up of carbon, one of the allotrope of carbon, which is a non-metal, and it's still able to conduct electricity. If we talk about diamond, diamond is not a good conductor of electricity. It's a bad conductor of electricity. Okay, so please remember that diamond, being a non-metal, is a very bad conductor of electricity. It does not have free ions. Whereas if we talk about graphite is a very good conductor of electricity because of the presence of free ions in them. Now, structurally, I will be explaining this to you in your carbon and its compound. Okay? Now, moving on to lustrous behavior. Luster bole to chamka, which reflects light. Metals are definitely lustrous, whereas non-metals are not. Now, in case of diamond and iodine, if we pick, diamond is again a non-metal, iodine is a non-metal. Though being a non-metal, they are lustrous. So, these are the exceptions that you have to remember. Now, moving on to next physical property, sonority. Metals are sonorous. As I entered the class, I was giving you chutti. So, yeah, metals are sonorous that produces ringing sound. So, there are different kinds of sounds, guys. Pat, 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 tap, 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 tan, tan, tan. What I'm talking about here is that tan, 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 tan wala sound, right? That is the ringing sound. So metals are sonorous as they produces ringing sound, whereas non-metals are non-sonorous very clearly. If we talk about hardness, metals are quite hard. As we pick iron, it's hard. I'll give you iron rod. Will you be able to bend it aise hi? Yeah, casually? No, we cannot. Or if I give you steel ka plate also, you cannot just bend it just like that. So metals are definitely hard, whereas non-metals are soft. But there are certain examples which are very, very important for your exam point of view, and that is sodium, potassium, and lithium. Let me add this here for you all. And a trick. What is a trick to remember this? Nakali. In Hindi, nakali means fake. Na for sodium, Ka for potassium, and Li for lithium. So these three metals are so soft that you can even cut with ghar ka knife also. So they are quite soft. If we talk about diamond being a non-metal, they are very hard substance, though it was told that non-metals are softer, but diamond is one of the naturally hardest known substance on earth. So yes, that is one of the exception here. All right, guys. Now, as basics are over, it's time for us to move on to chemical properties of metals. Now, chemical properties means what? We have to check that whether metals are reacting with certain substance or not. Not only that, whether metals are reacting with either oxygen or water or acid. Is that reaction vigorous? Is that reaction quick, dangerous, exothermic, endothermic? So let's talk about this in detail. All right, guys, let's get ourselves started. Tighten your seat belts now because we are about to start the reactions. So if we talk about reaction of metals with oxygen, there are certain metals which react vigorously. Like if I keep them in air, they will burn away. But there are certain metals which we have to provide heat to, which we have to burn it, put it on flame and do a reaction. So why there is a difference of metals reacting with oxygen with a rate of reaction that differs, that is because of the reactivity of a metal. So metal ka reactivity varies, according to that rate of reaction will also be affected, right? So now let's take a look on certain examples here. If we talk about sodium reacting with oxygen, definitely this reaction is quite vigorous. Why? Because sodium is highly reactive. So that gives you Na2O. If potassium reacts with oxygen, that is also highly vigorous reaction. In both the cases, there would be large amount of heat which is evolved and they will going to burn. So these two are highly vigorous reaction. Why? Based upon the reactivity of the metal. So let's look here. Sodium and potassium reacts oxygen even at room temperature. You don't have to provide extra efforts here to heat it in presence of oxygen. No. If you keep it out of kerosene bottle, they will burn on their own. They will going to react on their own with oxygen. Now, if we talk about magnesium, zinc, they do not react with oxygen at room temperature. They do react with oxygen, but not at room temperature. Normally, you have to provide them heat. You have to strongly heat them to make their corresponding oxide. So, if you remember this reaction, you all have done this in your laboratories also, where magnesium ribbon is taken and it is burnt in presence of oxygen, and that gives you a reaction that provides you a white dazzling flame. Along with that, white color powder of magnesium oxide would be formed. So you have to do some efforts to provide a reaction or to provide the product. Now, if we go down in the reactivity series and we come to copper, copper is something which will not going to burn as such. It will create a layer on itself of copper oxide. So let's say if I have a copper wire and if I kept it onto a flame, that will not burn as such, but it will going to create a layer of copper oxide which is black in color. This is very important for your exam point of view. Okay, so on strong heatings, metal like iron and copper do not burn even in air. They react with oxygen on prolonged heating. You have to heat it for a long time to find the visible product. Cool, boss? Cool. All right. Now moving on to further part of oxide reaction. Now as we all know, metal on reaction with oxygen give you metal oxide. Let me write this thing for you all. Metal on reaction with oxygen will form metal oxide. That's a general reaction, guys. Now, vigorosity of a reaction or a rate of reaction vary according to the reactivity of metal. That we already discussed. Okay. Now, once metal oxides are formed, some of the metal oxides are soluble in water and they form alkali. Like for example, if we talk about sodium oxide or potassium oxide, they are highly soluble in water and they form alkali like sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. Please mark this and write it in your notebooks. It is very, very important. Sodium oxide reacts with water, make an alkali a very strong base, that is sodium hydroxide, and same goes with potassium also. Now let's talk more about metal oxide. Metal oxides are found in two nature. Usually metal oxides are basic in nature. Some of the metal oxides are amphoteric in nature. Amphoteric means which has the ability to react with both acids as well as base. So again, let me mention this here for you all. Metal oxides are mostly basic in nature, but some of the metal oxides are amphoteric in nature. What does amphoteric means? Which can react with both acid and base. Like for example, zinc oxide, lead oxide, aluminium oxide, and so on. Okay? Now let's look at the reactions here. So if I try to react aluminium oxide with an acid, will it give me a base? So if I try to react aluminium oxide with acid, will it going to react and give me a product? Let's check that out. So if it's an oxide of a metal reacting with acid, that will give me salt and water. It's a neutralization reaction. So aluminium chloride plus water would be formed in this case. What will be formed? Aluminium chloride and water would be formed in this case. Yeah, it is balanced. Yes, it is balanced. So it's a neutralization reaction. Salt and water is formed. Now, if aluminium oxide reacts with NaOH, it will form a salt, that is sodium aluminate, NaAlO2 plus water would be formed in this case. Again, it's a neutralization reaction. So if I write a general reaction here, metal oxides, whenever reacts with an acid, gives you salt and water. Not only that, if metal oxides are also reacting with a base, some of the metal oxides, they will again give you salt and water. Overall, what we can say, what type of reaction is this? It is neutralization reaction, similar to that of neutralization reaction. Cool? Cool. Now, what will be formed here if zinc oxide reacts with HCl? If zinc oxide reacts with HCl, that definitely forms zinc chloride salt plus water. Now, one more thing I would like to add for all of yours knowledge. That's a common mistake you all do. Metal on reaction with acid give you salt plus hydrogen gas. I'll come to this later also, but still I want to point this out here itself. Metal on reaction with acid give you salt and hydrogen gas. Now, if it's an amphoteric metal, if I'm talking about amphoteric metal, it can also react with a base and it will give you salt and hydrogen gas. Now, what is the difference between above reaction and below reaction? What are the differences in the products that you can see? So difference here is in the byproduct. Here you are getting hydrogen and here you are getting water. There is a huge difference once it comes to hydrogen and water. If you are making a mistake in byproducts, also you straight away get 0. So please keep in mind, if a metal is reacting with acid or base, that always give you salt and hydrogen gas. Whereas if it's metal oxides which are reacting with acid or base, they will give you salt and water as the byproduct. I hope that is clear. Alright guys, on that note, let's move on further because I wanted to talk to you about certain trick which will help you to learn approximately 7 to 8 reactions at once. So I will help you here to learn some reactions. But before we jump on straight to the trick, I would like to discuss with you our second chemical property of metals, that is what happens if metals react with water. First chemical property was that metals react with oxygen, they form metal oxide. Second chemical property here is what happens if metal reacts with water. There are so many things that you have to remember in this particular case. Water is a hot water, cold water, or steam. Which metal exactly we are taking? Will it give exothermic reaction or not? So these are the combinations and the questions that might be asked in your paper. So let's talk about this. If I talk about highly reactive metal like sodium and potassium, they will react with cold water. As they will react with cold water, they will result into formation of metal hydroxide plus hydrogen gas. So now, let me talk here about the general reaction first. What is a general reaction? There are two products which are possible here. If a metal reacting with water, if metal reacts with water, it can either forms metal hydroxide of the metal plus hydrogen gas is evolved, or second case, it might form metal oxide of that particular metal plus hydrogen gas would be evolved. Now, question here is, how will you get to know about this? So, it completely depends upon the temperature of water. If you are taking cold water, you lands up on metal hydroxide. If you're taking steam with some of the metal, that leads to the formation of oxide of metal plus hydrogen gas. So, let's write the reactivity series first, and then everything will fall in line. So we all know how to learn reactivity series. Those who are not aware about it, I'll give you a trick for that also. Please stop calling me a zebra. I like her calling me smart goat. Okay. Now, what is this? This is a reactivity series here. P for potassium, S for sodium, C for calcium, then magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, lead, hydrogen, copper, mercury, silver, and gold. We have platinum, and in between we have other metals also. But as we are using only these metals for now, I have made it simpler and easier for you. So that's your reactivity series. And we all know that as we move down in reactivity series, reactivity of metals decreases. So they are arranged in the decreasing order of reactivity. Now listen to me very carefully. Simple way to learn a reaction. Potassium, sodium, calcium, first three metals reacts with cold water only, and they form hydroxide of metal. Potassium on reaction with cold water give potassium hydroxide. Sodium on reaction with cold water form sodium hydroxide. Calcium on reaction with cold water form calcium hydroxide. Plus hydrogen gas, muft. But in only first two cases, only in first top two cases, reaction would be exothermic. Only first two reactions are exothermic, guys. Why? Because these metals are so reactive that they react to give large amount of heat, which burns hydrogen gas and produces flame. Now, what kind of flame is produced in case of sodium? Golden yellow color flame. In case of potassium, that would be a lilac flame. I'll show you in the pictures also in a while. Now, if we talk about magnesium, magnesium shows two kinds of reaction. One of it, if it reacts with hot water. If magnesium reacts with hot water, that results into formation of magnesium hydroxide plus hydrogen gas. It's the only metal which give reaction with two different temperatures of water and forms two different products here. With steam, it forms oxide of magnesium plus hydrogen gas. Now, if we talk about aluminium, iron, and zinc, these three metals, aluminium, iron, and zinc, are in steamy love with oxygen. Remember that they will react with steam and they are in love with oxygen. These three metals are in love with oxygen gas. So they will definitely love to form the oxide of their metal. So aluminium, will form aluminium oxide, Al2O3 plus hydrogen gas. Then zinc forms zinc oxide plus hydrogen gas. Iron on reaction with steam form Fe3O4, ferroso-ferric oxide plus hydrogen gas. None of the reaction is exothermic anymore. Only first two reactions were exothermic. Remember this. I hope that is clear. So these many reactions you have learned in one go, and remember all the conditions at once. Top three metals with cold water, magnesium with both hot and steam, and then we have aluminium, iron and zinc reacting with steam. They love oxygen and they form respective oxide plus hydrogen gas. After that, none of the metal will react with water, neither cold, hot or steam water. Now, this is what I wanted to show you guys. As soon as you put a piece of sodium in cold water, that will start dancing. It will start dancing and burns with golden yellow flame. Now, same goes with potassium. As you put a piece of potassium in cold water, it will dance on the surface and burns with the lilac flame. So you have to remember the color of these flames also, and along with that product, NaOH plus hydrogen. Don't forget to write the heat here. It is important. Potassium will form KOH plus hydrogen gas plus heat. Don't forget to show that these two are exothermic reactions. Okay, another question that could be there in your paper is about calcium and magnesium. Why calcium and magnesium, after putting into water, they sink and then they start floating to the surface? Are you aware about this? If yes, do let me know in the chat box. So, as in when we put a piece of calcium in cold water, it first sinks and then it starts floating to the surface. Reason behind it is, once we put a piece in cold water, that start forming hydroxide of calcium, but along with that, hydrogen gas is formed. Those hydrogen gas bubbles will stick onto the surface of calcium. That's a calcium piece. These are bubbles of hydrogen gas. It will stick onto the surface, makes it feel lighter, and then again it will start floating onto the surface of water. And the same reason goes for magnesium also. So question could be asked for either magnesium or calcium. I hope that is clear. Cool, boss. Moving on to the next one. Our third chemical property of metal, what happens if metal react with dilute acid? That will definitely give us salt and hydrogen gas. Now, test of hydrogen gas, do let me know in the chat box. You all are aware about it. That is also one of the questions which is repetitively asked in your board papers, right? Okay. Now, as we talk about metals like zinc, zinc reacts with dilute HCl. Zinc react with dilute H2SO4. What would be the product form? And please do also let me know the type of reaction here. What is the type of reaction in this case? Come on guys, it's a challenge. Give me the answers in the chat box. Zinc reacting with dilute HCl will form zinc chloride plus hydrogen gas. Muft. It rekindles with the pop sound. Okay, zinc reacting with sulfuric acid forms zinc sulfate, ZnS2 plus, hydrogen gas would be born. What type of reaction is this? Zinc being more reactive displaces hydrogen from its position. If your answer is displacement reaction, you are absolutely right. Displacement reaction or a replacement reaction. Good job, guys. Cool. Let's take few examples here. Sodium on reaction with HCl, sodium on reaction with H2SO4. They will definitely react gadar bhai. They will react violently. Why? Because they are so reactive that they were going to react violently with acid and give an exothermic reaction here. So sodium on reaction with HCl, that forms sodium chloride plus hydrogen gas. Sodium sulfate would be formed in the second case plus hydrogen gas. Cool? I hope that is clear. Balancing needs to be done. Otherwise, your answer would be considered as incomplete answer. What would be formed if iron reacts with HCl, hydrochloric acid, dilute form of hydrochloric acid. Reaction would be less violent. Basically, your rate of reaction will lower down. Why? Because iron reactivity is less as compared to that of sodium, calcium and magnesium. So obviously reaction rate would be less, vigorosity would be less, and that results into formation of ferrous chlorides. Plus hydrogen gas would be evolved. I hope that is clear. Everything is coming back to your mind. That's the aim, that whatever you are learning right now should hit your mind again. And yes, that is how you do a proper revision. That is revision, guys. Okay, what will happen if copper reacts with HCl or H2SO4? There would be no reaction. Question, why? That is something which is asked in your paper also. So copper, being less reactive than hydrogen, does not have the ability to displace them. So with dilute form of HCl or H2SO4, copper cannot displace them, and hence there would be no reaction, as copper is less reactive than hydrogen. Another question, 2 mark or even an MCQ question. What is aqua regia? What is the ratio of HCl and HNO3? Are they concentrated or dilute? So there are multiple questions that can be made from aqua regia. Aqua regia is also called as royal water. So concentrated HCl and concentrated HNO3 mixture is a part of aqua regia in a ratio of 3:1. That means if I take 3 test tubes of concentrated HCl, there would be 1 test tube of HNO3 of concentrated form would be added. That results in a formation of aqua regia, which is quite powerful. Why? Because it can dissolve noble metals like platinum, gold. Usually gold and platinums are not reactive, does not react with air, does not react with water, does not react with any of the acid individually. But if 2 acids are mixed together in a proper composition and proper proportion in concentrated form, that definitely has the power to dissolve noble metals like gold and platinum. So that's royal water and aqua regia for you. Mark, this is important for your exam point of view. Alright guys, now it's your turn. Ball is in your court now. You have to complete this reaction. Another chemical property, what happens if metals react with salt solution? So if zinc is reacting with copper sulfate, what would be the product? And observation, and what will happen if zinc sulfate reacts with copper? Come on guys, think about it. Can zinc react with copper sulfate? Yes. Definitely. Zinc will displace copper from its position because reactivity of zinc is more as compared to reactivity of copper. That results into formation of zinc sulfate. Along with that, copper would be out alone. What would be formed in second reaction? Please write no reaction. No reaction, guys. I hope you haven't formed any product in this case. Copper cannot displace zinc because copper is less reactive. Copper mein itna dam nahi hai bhai that it can displace zinc from its position. So this would be no reaction at all. Now, what is the observation in first case? In this case, what you will write, blue color copper sulfate solution on reaction with zinc would fades to form colorless solution of zinc sulfate, and reddish brown or brown color of copper will settle. Right? So usually they ask this question in your paper, that what do you observe when copper reacts with zinc sulfate, or when zinc reacts? What do you observe when zinc reacts with copper sulfate solution? So such kind of observation questions are very commonly asked in your board exams. So guys, the aim of today's session is not only just to make you revise all the topics, but also make you aware about the important topics and the type of questions that comes in your paper, so that you are well aware about it and well prepared for it. Okay, so please listen to me very carefully what I'm saying, because these are the questions which are commonly asked in your paper. Even if you pick up your sample papers, you'll find similar questions there as well. Okay, So as we have learned a lot about metals and non-metals, we have seen physical properties of metals and non-metals, we have seen the chemical properties also, but what will happen if metals and non-metals interact with each other? So if metals and non-metals interact with each other, there would be a solid force of attraction. And that force of attraction is called as electrostatic force of attraction. Results into formation of dash compounds. Tell me in the chat box. Come on. What type of compound would be formed? It would be ionic compound or electrovalent compound. Why they are called ionic compounds? Because they are formed between ions. Compound is formed between ions, that is cation and anion. So if there is a metal and a non-metal interacting with each other, so metal would be like, yeah, I would like to lose electron because I'm electropositive element and I feel very stable and happy after losing. Non-metal is like, yeah, it's great, man, because I love to gain. So we can be friends together. You can lose, I'll gain, and we both would be happy. So non-metals, on the other hand, would love to gain electrons, again negative charge. We all know that unlike charges attract each other. So metals in its positive charge and non-metals in negative charge form, they were going to be attracted with a very strong force of attraction called as electrostatic force of attraction, results into formation of a compound. So let's say Na plus 1, Cl1 minus, they are attracted to form NaCl. So ionic compound has one specific thing that you have to remember. Very specific detail, and if you miss to write in a definition of ionic compound, you will definitely lose marks there. What is it? Ionic compounds are formed by the transfer of electrons from metal to non-metal. That's a keyword. Transfer of electrons is important for you to write in a definition. If you miss this detail, if you miss this keyword, you get 0. Okay? So transfer of electrons from one element to another, from a metal to a non-metal, resulting into formation of positive and negative, unlike charges attract each other with a very strong force of attraction, electrostatic force of attraction. Now, 2 to 3 marker question which lands up in your paper is the electron dot structure or a structure formation of ionic compounds. Not only that, covalent compounds from carbon and its compound are also asked in your paper for 2 to 3 marks. So you should be ready with the basic details and the basic drill of how to write electron dot structure. Those who have learned from me earlier also knows the details and knows the steps how to write electron dot structure, but I would like to tell you guys also here. You always have to start by writing electronic configuration. Like for sodium and chlorine, mention the electronic configuration clearly. 281 chlorine, 287. Now to draw the electron dot structure, you just need valence electrons. Put them in a form of dot and cross. So sodium ka, there is one valence electron, put it as cross. It's your choice if you want to use dot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? Another step is to show the transfer of electrons using an arrow from metal towards a non-metal. Once a metal loses its electron, put +1 with a square bracket, and then chlorine, after gaining electron, put a negative charge with a square bracket. And lastly, your final compound. Is that clear? This is how you will be creating the structures formation using electron dot structure. Let's try calcium oxide here. Calcium, atomic number 20, electronic configuration 2882. Then we have oxygen, atomic number 8, electronic configuration 26. We'll pick only outermost electrons here. Okay? Calcium, 2 electrons. Oxygen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Calcium needs to lose 2 electrons to attain stability, and oxygen needs to gain 2 electrons to attain the octet configuration. So what will happen? Transfer of electrons from calcium to oxygen. After losing 2 electrons, that becomes 2 positive. Oxygen, on the other hand, has gained 2 more electrons, completed its octet and formed 2 negative. 2 plus 2 negative, that leads to formation of calcium oxide. Clear here? I hope that is clear. Very neat and clean, simple 3 to 4 step process, and you will get 3 marks directly. It's quite scoring. Very, very scoring topic. Next is magnesium chloride. So start by writing the electronic configuration 282, chlorine atomic number 17287. Pick valence electrons here. Now what? Now what? Okay. We have 2 electrons to lose, but one atom of chlorine needs just 1 electron to complete its octet. That means there is 1 more electron which is extra. And magnesium will going to lose that any which way. So where it will go? To another chlorine atom. So let's draw a structure here. Magnesium with 2 electrons in its valence shell. We have one of the chlorine with 7 electrons. We have to have 1 more chlorine atom to attain stability and with 7 electrons. So what will happen? Magnesium has to lose 1 electron. 1 electron would be transferred to one of the chlorine. Other electron would be transferred to other chlorine atom. Overall, magnesium has lost 2 electrons. And there are 2 chlorine atoms with 1 electron each. So can I write 2Cl1 minus? Can I write this, or should I write this? Mg 2 plus Cl2 1 minus. Or should I write magnesium 2 plus Cl2 minus? Guys, it's on to you. Tell me A, B, C. What do you think? A, B, C. This is a previous year asked question, where in MCQ form they can ask you which is the correct way of presenting the final part of the electron dot structure. Come on, try it out. Is there a difference between these three? Absolutely, there is a difference. In A part, it is showing one ion of chlorine with 2 minus. It is absolutely wrong. It shows there is 2 chlorine molecules with 1 minus charge. How is this even possible? It is not right. What is right is option C here. Magnesium lost 2 electrons from Mg2 plus, but there is 2 atoms of chlorine which have 1 minus charge each, right? So that is the correct way of presenting, and after all, you will get MgCl2. Solid, boss. Mark this is important, and similarly, you can solve, I'll give you one homework here. You can solve aluminium chloride. Aluminium chloride. Draw the electron dot structure for aluminium chloride. Come on, I know you all can do that. Try it. Alright guys, it's time for us to move on to one of my favorite topic, and that is metallurgy. So before we begin with metallurgy, let me summarize what we have learned by far till now. So we have started with basic physical properties of metals and non-metals along with the exceptions. Then we have learned about chemical properties. In chemical properties, we have seen what happened if metal reacts with oxygen. Once metal reacts with oxygen, it forms metal oxide. Then there are very few metal oxide which get dissolved with water and form alkali. Metal oxides which are amphoteric can react with acids and bases to give you salt and water. Second, what you have learned is what happens if metal reacts with water. If they react with cold water, they'll form hydroxide of the metal plus hydrogen gas. But if there is a steam involved, they'll give you metal oxide plus hydrogen gas. Third chemical property that you guys have learned is metal on reacting with dilute acid. That give you salt and hydrogen gas. Now, why there was no HNO3 involved here? Why I didn't pick dilute HNO3 in this case? Tell me in the chat box. Come on, guys. And then we learned what about if metal reacts with a metal solution. It's a displacement reaction that you have learned in this case. Cool? Cool, 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 cool. Yep. All right. Let's talk about dilute HNO3 before we move on. Why we didn't pick dilute HNO3 in case of HCl or H2SO4? Why we usually pick H2SO4 reacting with metal or HCl reacting with metal, not HNO3? Because HNO3 is a strong oxidizing agent. It's a very, very strong oxidizing agent. So what will happen? It will oxidizes hydrogen to water. So hydrogen, which used to be formed in the product, will no more be formed, but instead of that, it will be oxidized into water, and HNO3 will itself reduce to oxide of nitrogen, either nitrogen dioxide, nitric oxide, or nitrous oxide. But there are exceptions here. केमिस्ट्री है तो एक्सेप्शंस हैं. Magnesium and manganese are only two metals which can react with very dilute HNO3 and form respective salt, and hydrogen gas would be evolved. याद रहेगा? I hope it is all revised clearly. Yes? Okay, guys. Alright guys, it's time for us to start with metallurgy on the high note. I hope you all are ready. So let's begin. But first we start with metallurgy. We have to understand how exactly metal exists. And what does metallurgy means, ma'am? Why we are learning metallurgy? Can you please tell us? Okay. In a while. So metals are usually found in combined state or free state. Now, what we have to do in metallurgy is to extract these metals and use it for further application. Like you have aluminium in your houses somewhere or the other, but from where that aluminium got extracted, somewhere or the other, aluminium was taken out, extracted, cleaned, purified, and delivered to your house. Right? So we have to find the basic part. We are at the basic level right now, that where exactly we were going to extract metals and how we have to extract metals. What are the steps we need to follow to extract metals? And that's metallurgy, guys. But to extract metals, we should be aware about their occurrence. So as I'm talking about combined state, metals were highly reactive. Like if I talk about sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, they are so reactive that they cannot be found alone. They will be there in a combined state somewhere. Right? Now, if we talk about elements which are found in free state, would be least reactive. They could be found in a native or an elemental state like gold, silver, platinum, and so on. We can extract them as it is. We don't have to like break the bonds and take it out. They're already there in nature as it is in its own form. Right? So that is what we have to be aware about, whether a metal is in combined state or free state. Based upon that, we would be applying a method to extract a metal. Alright guys, let's take few basic definitions here before we move on to the steps of metallurgy. What are minerals? What are ores? Metallurgy ka definition. And then we will start with the steps. So you all have learned these basics in your geography part. All right, let's take a look on the basic definition of minerals and ores. This is something you already have learned in geography. So let's take a quick look over here. Minerals are those elements and compounds which you extract naturally from the earth crust. It could be gems, stones, clay, bauxite, etc., etc. So any element or compound that we are extracting from the earth crust are in general called as minerals. But from those minerals from which metals can be extracted profitably and conveniently, only those minerals are then considered to be as an ore. What does that mean? Let me give an example here. Let's take two examples of clay and bauxite. They both have a common metal in them, that is aluminium. We want to extract aluminium from bauxite also and from clay also. But problem here is that from clay, aluminium cannot be extracted profitably or conveniently. It's so hard to get aluminium out of clay. And even if we get aluminium out of clay, yield is very small. So it's not a profitable biz. But if we talk about bauxite, from bauxite, aluminium can be extracted profitably and conveniently. So if I make you understand using a table here, clay, bauxite, mineral, and ore. So they both are minerals. They are both minerals. Why? Because they are extracted naturally from the earth crust. So they are minerals. But only bauxite is an ore here, whereas clay is not. Why? Because from clay, we are not able to extract aluminium. We are not able to extract metal profitably or conveniently. So it's just the mineral for us. It is not promoted to a category of ore. Whereas if we talk about bauxite, it is an ore. Why? Because it's a mineral which allows us to extract metal from it. So we have promoted that mineral to another category of an ore. So we can say, or you tell me, can we say this, that all ores are minerals, but all minerals are not ores? Is it true to say all ores are minerals, but all minerals are not ores? Right? Right to say? That is a statement which is usually asked in your assertion and reason 1 mark question. That is important. So minerals and ores are done. Minerals from which metals are conveniently extracted, profitably extracted, only those are called as ores. These are the list of ores and the name of ores given here, which is important for your exam point of view. So if I talk about hematite, hematite is an ore of iron from which iron metal is extracted. It's an ore of iron again, which is magnetite from which iron is extracted. Bauxite is an ore of aluminium from which aluminium is extracted. Al2O3.2H2O. 2H2O. Then we have limestone from which calcium is extracted, calamine from which zinc is extracted. It is important. Zinc blende again from which zinc is extracted, iron pyrite from which iron is extracted, cinnabar from which mercury is extracted. Name of ores are different, so you have to remember the name of ores. I know you are aware about chemical names, but here name of ores are specific, they are different and you have to learn them. On that note, let's move on to the extraction of metals. What is metallurgy? So, ma'am, we're just talking about extraction of metals in profitable or convenient manner. But how do we exactly do it? So, obviously, we need a process for that. It's not like that I'm taking out a mineral from the earth crust, washing it, and rubbing it, and I'll get a gin out of it. I'm not going to get a metal out of it just like that. I have to follow a process. Now, that process also has to be convenient, has to be profitable. Why it needs to be profitable and convenient? Because these things are used at a higher level, industrial level. We are talking about yields. We are talking about high production of the metals here. That is why it needs to be convenient process. That is why it has to be a profitable business. Clear? So metallurgy is a process of extraction of metals from in a pure state from their respective ores and refining them for use. So extraction of metals का जो process है, that also needs to be economical and convenient, and that process is called as metallurgy. Is that clear? Yeah. For that we need just 3 simple steps. First step is the concentration of ore or enrichment of ore. Simply we call it as साफ सफाई. What is it? It is साफ सफाई. Simple cleaning process. What is it? Simple cleaning process. Now, cleaning has to be done by different methods. That is something which is not in your syllabus, so we are not going to talk about that. But there is a flotation process, there is a process called as magnetic separation, and so on. So there are certain methods that we use to separate gangue particles from their respective ores. Gangue particles are the impurities that we need to remove in the very first step, that is called as concentration of ore or enrichment of ore. So gangue particles are impurities like clay or stones, mica, etc., which is unwanted particles, and we have to remove them in the first step. So it's a simple upar se superficial cleaning that we have to do. If we move to a second step, once a ore is cleaned completely, we have to extract metals from the concentrated ore or enriched ore. From the clean ore, we have to extract the metals now. Now, to extract a metal, it completely depends upon the reactivity of a metal. Which particular method needs to be applied to extract a metal, that is decided based upon the reactivity of it. Like for example, if I have to extract copper from its ore, or if I have to extract sodium from its ore, they both have different methods of extraction. Why? Because sodium is highly reactive, copper is very less reactive. So their methods of extraction are also different. Clear? Now, once metals are extracted, you have to refine them by a method called as electrolytic refining. That's your last step. So let's start with high reactive metals. So we have to divide the reactivity series in three parts: high reactive metals, moderate reactive metals, and then low reactive metals. I'll take you back to the reactivity series again. Or let me just bring that reactivity series for you here. Chalo. I'll bring this reactivity series here. Okay, for your ease. And by the end, I will shift it there again so you will not get confused. So let's take a look on this reactivity series: potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium, iron, zinc. Okay? So we have divided this into three parts. What are they? First, from top reactive series till here, then we have from zinc till hydrogen to moderate reactivity, and from copper to lower part, it's the low and least reactivity. Now, if we look at this particular chart, you might see a difference of reactivities in a different methods noted down here. Metals which belong to high reactivity, metals belonging to medium or moderate reactivity, and low reactivity. Now, metals which belongs to high reactive series are sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium. How they are exactly extracted? By a method called as electrolytic reduction of molten ore, or the electrolysis of molten ore. Now, one thing that you have to remember here: whatever metals we are extracting in case of high reactivity are already in its purest form. You don't have to purify them again. You don't have to take them to the electrolytic refining process or the third step again. They are already extracted in their purest form. So let's take a look on how do they actually occur in nature. So high reactive metals usually occur in nature either in form of their halides or oxides, either in form of their halides or oxides. Now, they are so reactive that they make a very strong bond with their oxides and halides, and to break that bond is not easy. So if I want to extract a metal, on a general basis, I just have to put a reducing agent and a metal could be extracted. But in this case, it is not possible. A simple reducing agent or a simple reduction will not work at all. Why? Because metals are so reactive and so strongly bonded to their oxides and halides. To break that bond, to extract that metal, we require a magical method, and that particular method is in presence of electricity. We have to do a reduction. A special kind of reduction needs to be done called as electrolytic reduction of molten ores or electrolysis of molten ores. Okay? Alright, so let me just tell you about electrolytic reduction now in detail, that how exactly we do electrolytic reduction of molten ore. First thing first, we are not going to use even a single drop of water in this case. We will be only using a melted form of an ore. If you add water to this particular process, that will hampers the further reaction, that will hampers the formation of product. So please remember, we are not adding even a single drop of water here. So to do an electrolytic reduction, let's say I've got rock salt. That is the name of ore, rock salt, from which sodium needs to be extracted. So I took a tank here, electrolytic tank, and filled it with molten sodium chloride. Molten sodium chloride means it is now been into free ions, sodium, Na plus and Cl minus. We have two electrodes here, which are inert electrodes not participating into a reaction, connected with a battery. The one which is connected with positive side or positive terminal is anode, connected with negative terminal would be cathode, automatically negatively charged, and the other side would be positively charged. Cool? Now, as soon as we switch on the battery, definitely there would be a movement of ions that takes place. Cations always move towards cathode and anions always move towards anode. Always. Okay? Now, at anode, oxidation takes place. Oxidation in terms of electrons means OIL. Loss of electron. Oxidation means loss of electron. So chloride ions loses electron to form chlorine, but single atom of chlorine never exists. So I'll balance this reaction. So a chlorine gas would be evolved at anode. But at the same time, if I talk about cathode, at cathode, reduction takes place. Reduction bole to RIG. Reduction is gain of electrons. Sodium ions move towards cathode, gain electrons and form sodium metal. Guys, this is what we are trying to do. We are extracting metal and sodium is now extracted. So sodium metal on extraction will deposit onto the surface of cathode, which is later being extracted. So that's how extraction of metal would be done. And please remember, a metal sodium that is being extracted here is already pure. We don't have to purify it further. Cool? Cool. That's how electrolytic reduction of high reactive metals would be done. Now, if we talk about moderate reactive metals like zinc or iron, they are available in nature either in form of their carbonates, sulfides or oxides. Like for example, iron is present in a form of hematite in its oxide form. Zinc is present in its carbonate form, or zinc is also present in its sulfide form in form of zinc blende, calamine and hematite. These are the ores which are present in nature usually. Now, what our job here is to extract these metals from their respective ore. Iron needs to be extracted and zinc needs to be extracted. But which particular method do we have to follow here? To extract a metal from carbonates or sulfide is very difficult. You cannot just break this bond just like that. But metals could be easily extracted from the oxides by just adding a reducing agent. By just adding a reducing agent from iron. But to extract the metal from the oxides are very, very simple. So if I just add a reducing agent to Fe2O3, I could extract iron easily out of it. So what we can do is, we can pakdo kaan ulta. How? If we convert these carbonates and sulfides to its oxide form, we can easily extract a metal by adding a reducing agent, isn't it? So if I put reducing agent to oxide, metals are extracted. So why not convert them into their respective oxides, add reducing agent, and then metals are extracted. As simple as that. So we have to do an extra step here to convert carbonates into its oxide form. To convert sulfide into its oxide form, we have to follow a method called as calcination and roasting respectively. So let me take you through a process of calcination. Calcination is the conversion of carbonate ores into its oxide by strongly heating them in the absence of, I would say, limited supply of air. In presence of limited supply of air, we are heating carbonates ore very strongly. That results into formation of the respective oxide and carbon dioxide gas would be evolved. Cool. Now, in case of roasting, roasting is done only on sulfide ores, only on sulfide ores. So once they are heated strongly in presence of excess of oxygen, they results into formation of respective oxide and sulfur dioxide gas would be evolved. So roasting is always done for sulfide ores. Remember this. Whereas calcination is always done for carbonate ores. To convert carbonate into oxide, calcination. To convert sulfides into its oxides, roasting. Now, once they are converted into respective oxides, we have to just add the tadka of reducing agent and we have a metal. Now, there are certain options of reducing agent. What are the options of reducing agent? Either you can put calcium, sodium, carbon, aluminium. But what we choose most widely is carbon because it is sasta, sundar, tikau. So we are using carbon here as a reducing agent, and a process where carbon is used as a reducing agent is called as smelting. Remember this term for 1 mark. A process where carbon is used as a reducing agent is called as smelting. So if we put carbon to this oxide ore, iron would be extracted. Like for example, in zinc oxide, if I put carbon as a reducing agent, I will get zinc and carbon monoxide gas would be evolved. So metal would be extracted by just adding a reducing agent to the respective oxide. So let me summarize what we did by far. In moderate reactive metals, the ores are either in form of oxides, carbonate, or sulfide. This is how they are present in nature. If they are carbonates and sulfides, we have to first convert them into respective oxide, add a reducing agent, and a metal would be extracted. But if it's an oxide, you have to directly put a reducing agent and you will get a metal extracted. Now, things here are little messed up and complicated. To convert carbonate into oxide, we have to follow a process called as calcination, heating strongly in limited supply of air. To convert sulfide into oxide, we have to follow a process called as roasting, heating strongly in presence of excess amount of oxygen. Now, in case of carbonate turning into oxide, carbon dioxide would be given as a byproduct. In case of sulfide, it would be sulfur dioxide which is given as a byproduct. Once they are converted into oxide, add a reducing agent, metal would be extracted. Cool. Now, reducing agent, if you're using as carbon, that process is called as smelting. But there are certain metals on which carbon as a reducing agent will not work, like chromium, manganese. These are certain metal oxides. If you put carbon as a reducing agent, they will eventually react with them and make a new product. So for that, we are using aluminium as the reducing agent. Instead of adding carbon here, because they'll eventually react, so it will not work, we need to extract these metals here. The aim here is to extract these metals. So these metals could be extracted if we use another reducing agent. And what we chose here is aluminium. So when aluminium is used as a reducing agent, that process is called aluminothermy, or we also call it as thermite process. What we call it as thermite process. Now let me write a reaction here for you and explain this in detail. The one which is highly important. Thermite reaction. Iron oxide, hematite, Fe2O3, right, reacts with aluminium. Now, what should be formed here? Obviously, we need to extract iron here. So, iron would be formed. Being a metal, it should be solid state, but it is found in a molten state. It is formed here in the molten state. Along with that, aluminium oxide would be formed and large amount of heat is evolved here. Here, to start a reaction, we have to provide heat. So, there are certain questions asked from this particular reaction. First, what type of reaction is this? Is this a displacement reaction? Is this endothermic or exothermic reaction? Or it is a redox reaction? What do you think? What do you have in mind about this? So, aluminium forming aluminium oxide, add of oxygen. Add of oxygen means it's oxidation. Loss of oxygen from Fe2O3 to Fe, it is reduction. So in a reaction, when reduction and oxidation both going on, it is definitely a redox reaction. So aluminium undergoing oxidation, so it is a reducing agent, hence proved. Aluminium is acting as a reducing agent. So this reaction is a thermite reaction, or we also call it as aluminothermy. Okay? So what is the type of a reaction? Redox reaction. Second, it is exothermic reaction. Some students might get confused here. Ma'am, you're providing heat here. Why it is exothermic, not endothermic? Because to start a reaction, we have given heat just to kick a reaction. Like for example, if you're not studying, your parents push you to sit and study. But there are students who once sit and start studying, require somebody to ask them to get up, right? So I was kind of a student when my parents have pushed me to sit, but once I'll sit, it's hard for me to pick up, right? They just have to ask me again and again to take rest or to go out and play. So that is the same case happening here. To start or to kick a reaction, they have provided initial heat. But once a reaction has started full-fledgedly, they have stopped the external heat, and whatever heat is generated in a reaction is used for the entire cycle, further cycle. Okay? So that is why we consider this as exothermic reaction. Not only that, aluminium being more reactive than iron displaces iron from its position. So this is a displacement reaction also. So it's 3 in 1. Cool? Redox, exothermic, displacement. And that makes it very, very important reaction. Okay, moving on to the extraction of less reactive metals. Less reactive metals like copper or mercury, right? Now, these two works little differently. To extract a low reactive metal is the easiest task of all, easiest. So you will have oxides or sulfides in your hand. Either they are found in oxide form or sulfide form. If there is an oxide form, you just have to heat it and you'll get a metal out of it. If you have a metal oxide, you have to heat it simply and you will get a metal extracted out of it. This oxygen gas would be formed as a byproduct. That's the simplest process of all. No reducing agent required here. But if you have a sulfide, again you have to follow a process of roasting, make it in oxide form, then add a reducing agent. No, you don't have to add a reducing agent here again. If it's a metal of low reactive series, you just have to heat it and you will get your metal extracted. Along with that, oxygen gas would be evolved. Simple process. No reducing agent is required. So, if you have mercury with you, so mercury as an ore is called as cinnabar. Mercury ka ore is called as cinnabar. It's a sulfide ore of mercury. So obviously with sulfide, you have to roast it. Roasting requires excess of oxygen and heating strongly. So you heat this strongly in presence of excess of oxygen. oxide of mercury is formed along with that sulfur dioxide gas is evolved. Once you have the oxide of mercury, you just have to heat it. Heat it at 300 degrees Celsius, and then you'll get your mercury out, plus oxygen would be formed as the byproduct. Simple, done and dusted. Simple process, no reducing agent required here. Once you have an oxide, you just have to heat it alone and metal would be extracted. Okay? I hope it is clear till here. Yeah, so we are done with the extraction of metals. We are done with metallurgy. But now once metals are extracted, you need to refine them, and that's your last and third step of metallurgy. Extraction of metals are done, guys. We have learned how to extract high reactive metals using electrolytic reduction of molten ore. Then we have learned how to extract moderate reactive metals using calcination and roasting process. Thirdly, we have just now learned how to extract the low reactive metals. Now, once we talk about least reactive metals, they are already present in free state, so you don't have to work much upon them. Now, last and third step of metallurgy, once metals are extracted, we need to refine them. Now, to do a refining process, we require a particular process called as electrolytic refining. For electrolytic refining, there are certain pointers that you need to remember. One of it is anode has to be the impure metal. Whatever metal you need to purify, place it at the anode side, means connected to positive terminal of the battery. And the same metal ka pure thin strip has to be connected to negative terminal of the battery, automatically made it as cathode. So your anode here is the impure metal that you need to purify. So let's say I have taken an impure copper metal here. Let's take copper metal. Let's say I have to purify an impure copper metal, and there is a pure metal of copper thin strip has been connected to negative terminal of the battery. Now, electrolyte needs to be taken for the same metal ka solution. So, I have to choose an electrolyte of same metal. So, copper sulfate is taken here as an electrolyte. Electrolyte means the ones which helps to conduct electricity. So, in this entire system, now I have copper 2 plus ions and sulfate ions, right? Cations always move towards cathode. Cations always move towards cathode. So, Cu2 plus ions will always move towards cathode, and sulfate ions will be moving towards anode. Now, problem here is copper itself participates into a reaction. So, here, impure form of copper, anode, is participating into a reaction. Sulfate has nothing to do here. They are just attracted towards copper, but they are not doing any reaction here. So, at anode, oxidation takes place. Oxidation means loss of electron. Who is losing electron? Copper itself. It's the impure copper metal who is going to lose electrons and form copper 2 plus. These copper 2 plus ions, will going to enter into the system, and meanwhile they are moving towards cathode. At the same time, they are moving towards cathode. So at cathode, reduction takes place. Reduction bole to gain of electron. Copper 2 plus ion are then gaining electrons and form what copper? Pure form of a copper, which will start settling onto the surface of cathode. So pure copper metal after some time will start depositing onto the surface of cathode, which is then later extracted. Cool? Cool. So metallurgy is all about refining metal in presence of electricity. We call it as electrolytic refining. And the same thing is present here. At anode, impure form of a metal is taken place. Cathode, pure thin strip of a metal, and electrolyte is the same metal ka solution. So cathode pe, it's reduction which takes place. Copper ions have gained electrons and form a copper metal, and that's actually your pure copper metal which we needs to get. At anode, impure copper anode itself is participating into a reaction, undergoing oxidation, loses electrons and form copper 2 plus ions, which are going into the electrolyte that eventually being used by the cathode. Alright guys, so now it's time for us to start with our very last topic, and that is corrosion. As we are learning about metals and non-metals, we are well aware about one of the property of metal, that is corrosion. They get corroded. If it comes in contact with air, moisture, acid, they start corroding eventually in a prolonged period of time. Corrosion is not a spontaneous reaction. It takes time. It happens slowly and gradually. Corrosion is basically eating up of a metal surface, deteriorating the quality of a metal in presence of oxygen, that is air, moisture. If we talk about iron specifically, though we have already learned this in our first chapter, that is chemical reactions and equations, I'll take you through this topic quickly so that I don't waste your time much. So if you want to revise corrosion, you can definitely go to chapter number 1 ka one shot revision, and I have given you an entire explanation with reactions of corrosion and tarnishing as well as rusting. So rusting is a term which is specifically used for iron, and tarnishing is a term which is used for the corrosion of silver or any other metal like copper. So copper after tarnishing turns green. Silver after tarnishing turns black in color because of the formation of silver sulfide. Whereas if somebody asks you, what are the conditions required for iron to get rusted? So there are two necessary conditions which require iron to get rusted, and that is air and moisture. That is something which is asked in 1 marks usually in your paper. Now there are certain methods to prevent corrosion. One of it is alloying, thin chromium plating, oiling and greasing. So these are oiling and greasing, galvanization, temporary method. Alloy is a permanent method to protect iron from getting rusted. So guys, in today's session, we have successfully completed the revision for metals and non-metal. I request all of you to solve as many questions as you can, because sitting here listening to me will not be everything. It's not 100%, I would say, until and unless you apply this information to the questions. And that's how you get confidence and encouragement. So in today's session, we have completed metals and non-metals, along with metallurgy, physical properties, chemical properties, all the reactions, corrosion. That's your homework, guys. I hope you will complete it. Do let me know the answers in the chat box. Write an equation where iron reacts with steam and calcium reacts with water. So, congratulations, guys, and soon we'll be starting with carbon and its compounds. So, stay tuned. That was it from my side, guys. This is me, Rashta Sajdev, signing off. Take care, stay safe, stay happy always, and फिर मिलेंगे चलते चलते in our next session. See ya.